Try this with me for just a second. Close your eyes. Ask yourself one question. Who is hearing these words right now? Don't answer too fast. Just notice what happens the instant you ask. You'll probably feel something like looking for the looker, reaching for the one who's reaching. It's strange. It's a little dizzying. And most of us, if we're honest, have felt this exact sensation before. Usually late at night, lying awake, when the mind goes quiet enough to ask its own question. Who's in here? Who's been running this whole show every single day for as long as I can remember? We don't usually stop long enough to ask. Life keeps us busy. There's always the next task, the next worry, the next conversation with ourselves about what we should have said differently. But every once in a while, maybe watching the light change on a wall in the late afternoon, maybe sitting alone after everyone else has gone to bed, the question rises up on its own. Who is the one watching all of this? 25 centuries ago, a man in northern India sat under a tree and refused to get up until he understood the answer. Not as a theory, as something seen directly, the way you see your own hand in front of your face. What he found doesn't just answer the question, it changes what the question was even asking. And by the end of this, you may notice something you've actually sensed all along. You just never had a place to put it. Before Siddhartha Gautama was anyone's teacher, he was a young man who had, by every measure available to him, already won, born into wealth, married well, a son on the way, palaces built specifically to keep anything unpleasant from ever reaching him. His father reportedly gave the order himself that the boy should never see sickness, never see old age, never see death. And still, something in him was restless, not unhappy, exactly, not ungrateful, just unfinished, like a question sitting underneath everything, quietly, refusing to be satisfied by another good meal or another comfortable evening. He had every reason most of us are taught to want, and it wasn't enough to make the asking stop, so he left. Not out of despair, but out of a kind of honesty most people never get around to. He wanted to know what was actually true. Not what was comfortable, not what kept the household running smoothly, but what was real underneath all of it. That's worth sitting with for a moment, because whatever brought you to a video with a title like this one, it's probably not so different. Some quiet dissatisfaction that doesn't show up on paper. A sense that something in the picture is missing, even when the picture looks fine from the outside. He went looking for it directly, and what he found didn't have a name yet. We'd eventually call it Sati Sampajanya. But let's set that word aside for a moment and just describe what it points to, because a word means nothing until you've felt the thing it's pointing at first. Think about the last time you touched something hot without meaning to. A pan handle, a stove burner you forgot was still on. There was no delay, no inner meeting where part of you decided whether this was worth noticing. The knowing was simply there, instantly, before any thought about it, before the word hot even formed in your mind, before your hand had finished pulling away. Now think about how differently your mind usually works the rest of the day. Most of the time, you're not just knowing things, you're also commenting on them. You touch something hot and there's the knowing, sure, but half a second later there's also a voice adding, "That was clumsy of me. I should be more careful. This always happens to me." That second layer, the commentary, the story, the judgment. That's not the same thing as the knowing itself. The knowing came first, clean and immediate. Everything after that was something added on top, that immediate, unforced knowing. Before the story arrives, before the reaction, before any inner voice starts narrating, is one way of pointing at what Sati Sampajanya means. We're using the term here as a doorway into the experience, not as a claim that one English description captures the whole of what that word holds, not a fixed thing to grasp and hold on to, more like clear comprehension. Simply knowing what's happening as it's happening, without extra layers piled on top of it. Now here's where the common misunderstanding creeps in, and it's worth naming early, because it trips up almost everyone. People hear awareness or watching your mind, and they picture a kind of mental security guard, someone standing off to the side with a clipboard, monitoring your thoughts, correcting you when you slip, keeping score of how well you're doing at being present. That's exhausting just to imagine. This isn't a new job for you to perform. It's not another task added to an already full day. What's being pointed to isn't something you do. It's something that's already happening underneath the doing. The same way your hand already knew the pan was hot before you arrived to comment on it. So hold that loosely for a moment. Not a guard standing apart, working hard to keep watch. Just the knowing of what's happening before the mind has time to turn it into a story. But hold it loosely, because we're about to look even closer at what that something actually is. And the answer isn't quite what most people expect. Let's use an old image to get there, one that's been used in these teachings for a very long time. Picture an old hand mirror, the kind that's been in a family for generations, passed down, sitting on a dresser somewhere. Its surface is silver, smooth, made specifically to reflect whatever is placed in front of it. Over the years, dust settles on that mirror, fingerprints, a little grime near the edges. Look at it on a dim morning, and you might not even be able to tell there's a mirror there at all. Just a dull gray surface, cluttered, hard to see anything clearly in. Now here's the question that matters. When the mirror is covered in dust, has anything actually happened to its capacity to reflect? No, not even slightly. The dust sits on top. It never sinks in. It never becomes part of the glass itself. Thoughts, worries, old grudges, the running commentary about what you should have said, what might go wrong tomorrow, who wronged you decades ago and still lives rent-free in your head. All of that is the dust. It settles. It accumulates. Some days it's thick enough that you can't see past it at all. But it never becomes the mirror. It only ever sits on top of it. Here's where most of us get it backwards, and it's an honest mistake, because it feels so logical. We look at the dusty mirror and think, I need to become clear. I need to work hard, meditate more, fix myself, get rid of every stray thought until finally, someday, I'll be at peace. But notice what that actually assumes. It assumes something needs fixing, that the surface itself is flawed. Even buried under years of grime, the capacity to reflect clearly never actually went anywhere. It was simply covered over the whole time. Here's a small way to test this for yourself, right now, without doing anything special. Think of a moment from years ago when you were completely swept up in worry. Maybe the night before a surgery, or the week after losing a job. Feel how thick that worry was at the time. Now notice, that worry is gone. It passed. The knowing of it passed right along with it. It was never a separate, permanent thing sitting underneath, watching the worry from a safe distance. It was simply knowing, present while the worry was present, and just as present now that something else fills this moment instead. This changes something practical about how you might relate to a bad day. Most of us treat a difficult morning, a painful phone call, a body that won't cooperate the way it used to, a memory that won't stop replaying, as proof that something is wrong with us, as if the dust meant the mirror itself had failed somehow. But what if it just meant today there's more dust than usual? Nothing has gone wrong underneath it. It's simply a heavier day, thicker weather passing through. Not a broken mirror. So far, so good. This is already a useful way to hold a hard day. But here's where the old teachers push one step further, and it's worth following them there, because it's where this really opens up. There's a story from centuries later, in China, about two monks and a mirror. And it takes this exact image and turns it on its head. A senior monk, a very learned man, wrote a poem to show his understanding. It went something like this: the body is the tree of awakening. The mind is like a bright mirror standing on a stand. At all times, we must wipe it diligently and let no dust alight. It's a beautiful poem. It says almost exactly what we've just been saying. Keep the mirror clean. Don't let the dust build up. Everyone who heard it was impressed, except one man in the kitchen, someone nobody expected anything from. He couldn't even read, heard the poem, and had someone write down his own response instead. And his response undid the entire premise. It went, roughly, Bodhi originally has no tree. The bright mirror also has no stand. Originally there is not a single thing. Where could dust ever land? Read that again, slowly, because it's easy to miss on the first pass. Not the mirror is clean. Not even the mirror is naturally clear underneath the dust. He went further than that. He said there was never a mirror standing there to begin with. Never a fixed thing for dust to land on in the first place. This is the deeper turn we've been circling toward this whole time. It's one thing to say, there's a clean mirror underneath the dust, and I need to find it. It's a different thing entirely to look even closer and notice. There was never a separate thing called awareness sitting behind your eyes, waiting to be discovered, the way a coin might be waiting at the bottom of a drawer. What's actually here isn't an object you locate. It's simply seeing, happening, hearing, happening, knowing, happening. Not my awareness, reflecting the world from a fixed little platform somewhere behind your forehead. Just the reflecting itself, moving, alive, not a thing, not a place, not a someone who owns it. That's not a small difference. It's the whole difference. Because the moment you turn the mirror into a possession, my awareness, my true self, the real me underneath all this noise, you've quietly built a brand new self to hold on to. A quieter one, a calmer one, maybe even a wiser sounding one, but still a me, still something to protect, maintain, and eventually lose sleep over keeping clean. Not me, not mine, not some deeper self hiding underneath the surface self. That's the trap even careful, well-meaning practice can fall into. Trying so hard to find the one who is truly aware that you end up building a subtler, more polished version of the very self you were trying to see through in the first place. That monk in the kitchen didn't invent this. He was simply looking closely enough to see, in his own words, something the Buddha had already pointed to directly, centuries earlier. So let's go back to that original pointing and hear it in the Buddha's own teaching. Not as a new idea, but as the same door, opened from the very beginning. There was a man named Bahia. He lived far from where the Buddha taught, and for years he wore bark cloth and lived as an ascetic, convinced, genuinely convinced, that he had already reached the deepest realization available to a human being. People around him began to believe it too. He had followers. He had a reputation. Then, according to the old account, something shook him loose from that certainty. A presence he trusted, someone who had known him in a previous life, appeared and told him plainly, "You have not arrived. You're not even on the path yet." It's hard to imagine how disorienting that must have been. Everything he'd built his identity around, the years of discipline, the certainty, the followers who looked up to him, suddenly in question. So he traveled, quickly and on foot, to find the one teacher he'd heard could actually show him something real. He found the Buddha walking on his alms round, early morning, moving silently from house to house. Not exactly the moment for a formal teaching. And Bahia knew that. He asked anyway. "Please," he said, "I don't know how much time either of us has left. Teach me now." What he received back was short. No lengthy explanation. Just this, roughly. In seeing, let there be only the seen. In hearing, only the heard. In sensing, only the sensed. In knowing, only the known. That's it. And according to the account, right there, standing on the road, Bahia understood completely. Sit with that phrase for a second. In seeing, only the seen. Not in seeing, there is a seer, plus the seeing, plus what's seen, just seeing. Notice how we normally describe an experience. I see the tree. There's a me. There's the seeing, and there's the tree. 3 separate things stitched together into a sentence. But look at what actually occurs right now. If you glance at anything in front of you, is there really a separate you standing behind the seeing, operating it like a camera? Or is there simply seeing, happening, with the sense of a separate operator added on afterward as a kind of mental habit? Look for that operator directly, the way you'd search a room for someone you were told was hiding in it. Search carefully. What do you actually find? Not a person standing behind the eyes, just seeing. Not an owner of the hearing, just hearing. The harder you look for someone standing apart from the experience, the less anyone seems to be there. And yet nothing about the experience itself is missing. The seeing is still complete. The hearing is still whole. There was simply never a separate watcher required for any of it to happen. That's what the Buddha was pointing Bahia toward directly in his own teaching. And it's the same door that Monk in the kitchen found his way back to, centuries later, standing in a different room, holding a different tool, but pointing at exactly the same absence of anyone standing apart. Not a technique, not years of practice. A direct pointing at what's already the case, the instant you stop inserting an extra character into a scene that never needed one. Now, if all of this sounds like it's leading somewhere cold, like the point is that nothing is real, or that you should stop caring about the people and things in your life, that's exactly the point where most people misunderstand what's being offered here. So let's clear it up directly. When people hear, "There's no separate self behind it all," they often picture someone who stops caring, someone who shrugs at their grandchildren's birthdays, who stays unmoved when a friend is grieving, who becomes so philosophical they forget how to be a decent, warm human being sitting at the dinner table. That is not what's being described, not remotely. Seeing clearly doesn't make you care less. It tends to make you care more accurately. When there's no me standing in the middle trying to manage the experience, protect its image, or get something out of it, the love simply moves, direct and uncomplicated, responding to what's actually in front of you instead of being filtered through 50 years of old fear, old resentment, and old habits of holding back. So this isn't the road to indifference. If anything, it's the road to finally being present with the people in your life without a second, quieter you standing off to the side, narrating and managing the whole thing. All right, so what does any of this actually look like on a Tuesday afternoon? For someone who still has bills to pay, a family that needs attention, a body that aches a little more than it used to. You don't need to disappear into a monastery. You don't need hours of silence, though a little quiet certainly doesn't hurt. What's being pointed to here is available in the middle of an entirely ordinary life, because it was never about escaping your life in the first place. It was always right here, underneath it. There's an old teaching approach, sometimes described simply as being careful, being attentive, and observing, that doesn't ask you to change anything about what you're doing, just to be present for it, plainly, not managing it, not judging whether this moment measures up, just being there for it as it actually is. Here's one small way in, small enough to try today. Next time you're washing a dish, or drinking your morning coffee, or simply sitting in a chair by the window, just notice. Not notice and analyze, not notice and fix. Just notice that noticing is already happening, on its own, the same effortless way your hand already knew the pan was hot before any thought arrived to announce it. And if you can, notice one more thing underneath that. Is there really a separate you doing the noticing, off to the side, watching yourself notice? Or is it simpler than that? Just the coffee, the warmth, the noticing, all one piece, with no extra passenger riding along. Here's a second way, just as small, for a different kind of moment. The next time you catch yourself annoyed, maybe someone cuts you off in traffic, maybe a family member says something that stings. Pause for one breath before reacting, not as a technique to master, just as a chance to look. In that breath, see if you can notice the irritation directly, the way you'd notice weather passing through. Not I am angry, and not I am the calm one watching my anger either. That second version is just as much a story as the first. Just heat, here, right now, rising, already starting to change. No owner required for any of it. That's the whole practice, really. Not becoming the perfect, unshaken watcher. Just seeing clearly enough, often enough, that the watcher quietly stops being needed. So, back to where we started, eyes closed. Who's here? Maybe, if you actually look. Not think about it, but look. The way you'd look for someone hiding in an empty room. The honest answer isn't a name, or a presence, or even awareness itself standing calmly behind everything. Maybe the search simply comes up empty, and yet nothing is missing. The hearing is still happening. The seeing is still happening. Life is still fully, vividly here. It just turns out no one separate was ever required to run it. Not me, not mine, not some deeper self quietly pulling the strings from behind the curtain. Not because a deeper self was found and confirmed underneath, but because, looking closely, nothing separate was ever there to find. Just this, happening, complete in itself. Everything we've walked through tonight, the mirror, the dust, the monk in the kitchen, Bahia on that road 25 centuries ago, even these words themselves, none of it is the thing itself. It's only a hand pointing towards something you have to look at for yourself, in your own life, in your own quiet moment, for it to mean anything at all. Once you've looked, you don't need to carry the pointing hand around with you. Let it go. What matters was never the words. So here is an invitation, not an instruction. No steps to follow, nothing to achieve by tonight. Just this. The next time you go looking for the one who's watching and can't quite find them standing apart from the watching itself, Let that be all right. Let that even be a kind of relief. May nothing need to be added to this moment, and nothing need to be swept away. Be well and stay awake.